Good evening.
Welcome back. Welcome back. How we doing? All right. So I don't remember. Did we have a show last week? It feels like we didn't.
We did. We did.
Okay. Yes. All right. So we're back with candidates because it is election season.
In like 5 weeks, right? Was it what?
Yeah.
5 weeks? No, maybe a little bit more. About 7 weeks. It's about 7 weeks, I think.
7 weeks, but
less than 7.
Less than 7 weeks, yes.
Yeah.
Less than 7, but that goes by like a blur. Okay, so we got to get all these candidates in. Let's see what they got to give to Broward County. All right, so I'm your co-host, Nikki Grant. You call me Nikki because I don't want nobody butchering my name. And we're here to talk with a candidate for county commission. I know last week we talked about how
Fort Lauderdale City Commission.
I know.
You said county commission.
Sorry. County commission was last
time,
right? Was before it was during primaries. That's right. All right, but we said we were going to talk to commissioners, candidates for commissioners for the city. So we have one, and we have a couple that's scheduled we're scheduling to get them on. And we're looking forward to hearing what they have in store for the cities. And because you know what, these people, these county commissioners, city commissioners, mayors, they make decisions for our everyday lives. So it's really important for us to learn these candidates and what they have plans for their respective cities. So we're excited to talk about that. I'm gonna let co-host introduce herself, and then we're gonna introduce our guest, and then allow her to let us know who she is, what she's about, what she's doing. We're excited. We're all about the lady candidates.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's a whole lot of black girl magic happening on those ballots. And it is black girl magic, but people be trying to say like we shouldn't just vote for people because they black. No, they're qualified and they just black. You know what I'm saying? So this is not like, oh, you voting for a black person. You voting for a person that's extremely qualified, that has compassion. And I love the way the ballot is looking. It's like a whole bunch of people that are, judges. Ms. Dubose that's going to run for a lot of city commission. It's a lot of awesome candidates that not only are they bringing experience, they're bringing relatability and all of these things to the area, which we absolutely need, and I think is very important to have on the board. So again, I'm Sandra Sheffrere, and we're just here to inform you of the candidates. We started this because down ballot candidates don't get enough love. They don't get enough exposure, and they're the most important. They're very important because they're the ones that's making decisions about your everyday life, right? When there's a crack on the street, they're the ones that can make those kind of decisions. When they want to beautify the neighborhood, because I live in one of them communities where they always planting trees in the middle of the street, and I'd be like, can I have a lane instead? But they want to put a tree up there. They're the ones that make those kind of decisions. So you got to go to those meetings and have that conversation. Be like, I don't need another tree, people. I need some lanes. So this is, that's a position that Ms. Dubose is running for. She's going to tell you they do more than just that, right? They bring a lot of awesome things and a lot of awesome opportunities into that community, and we're going to get into that when we start talking to her. So Narnique got some dates to give y'all about when y'all going to vote for her. All I'm going to say is the last opportunity you have to vote for her is November 8th, and Narnique is going to tell you about when the first in the very beginning and how you gonna make that happen.
Absolutely. So listen, November 8th, as co-host said, is the last day to vote. So early voting starts October 24th and it runs through November 6th. October 24th is early voting, and you can vote anywhere, right? However, because we're having like local cities, I suggest you go to wherever your city is and make sure you vote there. Also, the last day to register to vote in order to vote in November is October 11th. October the 11th is the last day you can register to vote. So if you haven't done so, I implore you to do it as soon as possible. And then, what did I say? Yeah, early voting October 24th to November 6th. Last day to vote November 8th. Last day to register to vote is October 11th. Make sure you do that. Don't let nobody tell you that your vote don't matter.
It does.
It does. And so it's important that we give out dates, and we'll continue to give out these dates.
No, we need to vote by mail. When you could submit to vote by mail, because some people are going to need to do that.
I don't have the vote by mail on here.
We need to vote by mail. We'll get that information on while we're doing the show. Because vote by mail is also
they're supposed to put that on. I'm wondering if the same as the vote by mail is by August 11th also, but I'll double check. Let me check it.
Yeah, because vote by mail is also important because some people that's the option that they're going to need to take. And what's important is that you do it early because when you get closer to the time, you can't just drop it off. Like during the early voting, you can drop off your vote by mail ballot in any location. But on election day, no, you got to take it to downtown Fort Lauderdale or to Lauderdale. And a lot of times people don't know that. And so they come to their polling location, they can drop off the vote by mail ballot, find out that they can't. And if, for example, if you live out west, you ain't trying to drive, you got to be committed to drive to downtown Fort Lauderdale in the afternoon after you done came from work to drop that ballot off. So do not wait till the last day to do that. Mail it out as soon as you get it. And once you know who you're going to vote for or doing early voting, drop it off. You have the option of every location, but on election day, you have to take that thing to downtown Fort Lauderdale or to Lauderdale Mall. And depending on where you live in the county, that may not be an easy thing to do. We want you to do it. And you know what usually happens that you can, if you're at your precinct, you can go ahead and vote at your precinct. But you know, they do allow you to carry one other person's ballot. So if you got your wife's ballot or your husband's ballot, you can't vote for them. So you either gonna drop that off. And we were in a meeting where they said folks were so frustrated, they literally just threw it in the garbage and didn't vote at all because they didn't want to go all the way down to downtown Fort Lauderdale. So please don't be in that position. One of the races for judge, it was a matter of 300 people votes that made a difference, and every single vote counted. We need to not have people because they didn't know to not turn in their ballots and not vote.
So the vote by mail ballot needs to be requested and accepted for an election no later than 5 p.m. on the 10th day before election day. So 10 days before November 8th
it's probably like October 29th or something like that. 28th or 29th.
That sounds about right.
Yes. So you have 10 days before the election date in order to request your mail-in ballot. By the time, if you wait too long, don't even try to mail it back. You need to
drop that off
in person.
Okay.
In person.
All right. So that's
why it was so important. We spent like 7 minutes talking about it. So now we got to talk to Yvette about what she's going to do. But she wants y'all to know how to vote for her though. So
yes. So
absolutely.
Tell us all about you, who you are, what you're running for, and we'll get into questions.
Yes. And thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be a part of this Black Girl Magic as well. I am Yvette Dubose. I'm a candidate for Fort Lauderdale City Commission. And long before I filed my paperwork, I have been an advocate, community activist, and a voice to amplify marginalized voices in our community. I'm a small business owner. I've worked in health and human services, assisting with children in the foster care system in which we are overrepresented, find a permanent loving home. I'm on the team for Get Out the Vote Broward, volunteer for a whole bunch of groups. But what I learned from my parents, and my dad is a retired pastor, and my mom a retired teacher, is that service is required every day. And so that's a tenet that my family subscribes to. And I believe, and I've learned over time and in my work and with everything that I see in our community, because I live, work, and play here, is that our community has been blighted for so long. So with everything that's happening and all the growth and all the development, we're still playing catch up because there have been systems of inequality, systems that were meant to keep us boxed into a specific geographic area. There are systems inherently racist and structural systems that prohibited our businesses from growing, from diversifying. And these are some of the things we're dealing with now. And I know as a small business owner, it can be a challenge with access to capital, to keep your business afloat, to grow your business, to expand your business. And so all of these things have been paramount. And as I've been on a listening tour for the last year, I'm just listening to my community. What are some of the concerns? And because I think it's important that, and I'm not a politician, but I have set out to be a public servant. It's important that we who are seeking office listen to our voters and formulate our vision together. So many times people come in our community, come to our churches when it's election time and tell us what they think we should do. But I think it needs to be the other way around, because the voters hold the power. And I said this when I announced that I was going to run back in March. Everything about us should include us. So if we're talking about development, if we're talking about small businesses, if we're talking about access to healthcare, if we're talking about public transportation, if we're talking about affordable housing, if we're talking about safety of our communities, we need to have a seat at the table. And we don't have an advocate right now in our district. And when I say advocate, I mean a rising tide lifts all the boats. So it is not about me, it is about my community. And so when it becomes about that person, you've already lost sight of we the people. Yeah. And I think the other challenge we have with my specific community and the public in general is what is going on downtown that impacts my everyday life. I don't have time to go to city commission meetings. I didn't catch the Zoom. I didn't know that they were doing that or weren't doing that. Or what's the response to the storm water issue? Every time it rains, it's flooding on my street. My parents live in Melrose. They're retired on a fixed income. They can't afford to be fighting with their insurance company, trying to be made whole because of flooding that happened not long ago because the city did not maintain the stormwater drains. So these are some of the things that I think the city has not been proactive. We've been reactive. And when you get enough calls and complaints and people blasting you on social media, then we come out in full force. If we had an advocate that was saying, this is the issue in Melrose, this is the issue in Rock Island, this is the issue in Dorsey Riverbend, this is the issue in Lake Air, this is the issue in Home Beautiful, all of the Riverland, all of the communities that are now District 3, each community, we have some overlap, but we also have some very distinct issues. And I think Lauderdale Manors has been virtually ignored for the last 4 years. You know, there are streets that needed to be paved that were slotted to be paved, have been complained about by the neighbors. Does it take 4 years to pave a street, to pave a road?
It shouldn't.
Aren't we taxpayers?
We are.
So where's the disconnect? Why aren't we getting it addressed? And so maybe that doesn't mean anything to your community, but riding through a pothole every day doesn't help our home values. We pay taxes like everybody else.
And it tears up your car that you probably can't afford to fix.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like you get that tire messed up, and then instead of changing one, you got to change two, or it does some frame damage, and that's a whole nother problem, right? Like something where the city's accountable for is now really affecting a person in their ability to move around, go to work, and do all those types of things.
And that's one of the challenges I have seen time and time again as I've knocked on doors and listened to my neighbors in each respective community. What are you saying? And the issues, like I said, are different in Melrose than they are in Lauderdale Manors, but we do have a lot of overlap. For instance, the way our communities are situated, we're right off of Broward, we're off of 31st, we're north of Sunrise. And a lot of times when there's 5 o'clock traffic coming from the east or downtown, our streets, our neighborhood is a pass-through.
Yeah.
There's no speed bump stopping you from flying because you're trying to avoid all the traffic or the accident that was on Broward. That's not fair to my son who's 8, who can't play in the front yard because you guys are flying by, and we live in a school zone. Mm-hmm. There's no recourse.
And
if I had a speed bump, it might.
And talking about living in a school zone,
in
the morning, you're like with people doing drop off, and I'm not sure, it's a whole different thing because my son goes to a school and the drop off line was so long. The community complained, which I mean, and rightly so, because I'm not mad. They complained that they actually changed the time school starts. And they staggered the time that students come to school because the traffic was so bad in the morning that the people who are living in the communities that we could barely get out the house to like go to work or do whatever or go for our jog or whatever they want to do. But they complained so much that they got the school to change the time that school starts to reduce the traffic. And then there's some communities, they seem to not care that people came back out of their driveway because the school drop-off line is too long. And those are things that are important. And is that something the city commission could get involved in and try to assist the community with?
Absolutely. It has to be a coalescing, a coming together of the community, and everyone needs to be on the same page. It can't just be something one neighbor is complaining about. Does the HOA know about the problem? Same thing like with Airbnb. You kind of have to have, we all agree this is a problem. We all think that this is an issue. The HOA meets with your representative, or there's actually an office for neighbors down at City Hall. If there's no resolve, then you kind of take it up the chain. But we operate in silos, and there's strength in the collective, there's strength in numbers, and we actually hold the power as neighbors and as voters, but we all kind of have to be on the same page. And so what I envision for the city and what I plan to work on when elected is this, coalescing that I've done with neighbors, and we all agree that we want public safety. We want a safer neighborhood. We all agree we need more economic development in our community. We all agree that we have concern about our property values and the city maintaining what is the city's to maintain and how it impacts our property. And for those of us who are renting, we all agree we're in an affordable housing crisis. And so if we agree on all these things, let's sit down at the table and talk about in real time, not a musical chairs policy where we need to actually do something. It is imperative we do something now. People are spending 30 to 40% of their income on rent or on their home, and they can't afford to live. And we're all dealing with, the price at the pump. We're all dealing with the 40-year inflation and how much more it costs in groceries. So I think collectively, we all agree on these things. And so we need to move it along, and having the support of the community makes a big difference than it just operating in silos and I'm the elected and this is what I'm going to do. No, this is what my community says needs to be done. And that's kind of how I operate.
And I think it's important to have a city commissioner that's engaged and let the community know that is something they can do, and that they actually have the power to do that, right? Because half the time, you have people who are elected, they only focus on being elected and keeping their job, and they're like, well, we don't want to tell the people all of what their rights are because then they're gonna come over here and start making noise and then mess up my stuff, right? But if you have a person that's truly interested in what's best for that community, then you will educate the community too, because again, this isn't something you would know just because, right? Like they don't teach this in school, which they probably should, but I know they don't. The commissioner will be like, listen, if you guys are having this issue, get your community together, this is when the meetings, and let folks know. Because one of the other things I heard when we were doing some advocacy work for autism, a lot of the elected officials say like, well, ain't nobody called us and told us that was a problem. We didn't know, right? So they can say that we don't know if no one calls and tell them, right? But then they don't know that they can call and tell you unless the elected official educate the community, or maybe some other organization may do that, but the community needs to be educated to know that they do have the power to make these kind of changes if they come in number, and if it's something going on, don't be scared to call. Because I remember we had a situation in Miramar where they were doing some construction in the morning when it was time to drop the kids off to school, and there was no warning. They didn't tell us, and I got caught up in this, and I called the office, and I called the mayor's office, and I was like, listen, y'all can't be doing no construction in the morning and without you putting a sign and letting people know at this particular time or whatever.
Right.
And literally by that afternoon, the sign was up letting the people know what time construction was going to be. And they also made sure they stopped before people started dropping their kids off at like 7 o'clock in the morning. But sometimes they may not have thought about it, right? Because it's probably not something that's affecting them. So you should let them know. But then that's also why it's important to have somebody like Yvette on the board, because she lives, right? You live, work, play in that community. So you know what people are going through, and she could be that voice because she's experiencing it and living it, as opposed to someone who may live in one of the.
I will add on to that. I met a wonderful young woman who came to my kickoff because one of the groups that have endorsed me, and I'm blessed and fortunate to have quite a few community endorsements. And she follows Ruthless, who advocates for women and their choice, and they've endorsed me. And so she came to the kickoff. I didn't recognize her face, and I was trying to piece it together. She is a veteran. And she came up to me and said, I came because I know that you speak about diversity and inclusion, and I want to know what you plan to do with our veterans. And then she went on to explain some of the challenges she's had with accessing benefits that she has earned as a veteran to our country, right? On my dad's side, we're 3 generations serving in all the branches in the military. And so my hat's off to anyone who has served our country. And she talked about all of the issues she's had and some of the struggles she's had with homelessness, very open, and some of the issues she's had with mental health. And so that goes into social services, which is kind of my wheelhouse, right? And so had she not brought that up, I wouldn't have been thinking about how can a city, beyond it being, oh, that's a federal issue, you're going to contact your local, VA. That's not enough. That's not enough. And that's what I call musical chair policy. Let's kick it down, call that person and they'll help you. That's not engaging. That's not enough. And that's not advocating for people who live in your community and who are potentially voting for you. And so a way that voters can get engaged, all politics is local. Mm-hmm. So let's think about it that way. So if you're talking about there's a noise ordinance and it triggers my PTSD because I'm a veteran, who can I call? Because I call and nothing happens. And the noise ordinance for the city is 10 p.m. And so quickly looked it up, this is who you're going to call. But she's called before and no one has come. And she's having flashbacks from being at war. Mm-hmm. So that's an issue. So we need to make sure our local community policing partner from the city of Fort Lauderdale is aware this happens at this house almost every night. It's an issue. And so having just intentional conversations, talking about, and sometimes it's hard, you're like, okay, I don't know, but let me get back to you, but really get back to the person. Don't just kick it down the road and say, we don't really do that here, but resources and who can help your citizen. I think that's what we're missing with local politics and politics in general. We forget that it's we the people. It's not about them, it's about us.
Right.
And how we have to continue to hold everyone accountable and not just say, oh, it's politics, my vote doesn't matter. But it does.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And that person and they should understand, the politicians should understand that, listen, these people entrusted me to go and do the things that I told them I was going to do, when I got this position, right? It's not just about me saying things and paying lip service to keep this job. I told them when I got here, I was going to do those things. And that's what they need to folks need to hold them accountable for. And the other thing that we need to, as voters, don't be afraid to fire nobody if they're not doing a good job, right? Absolutely. But but I like them and they nice. Well, that liking them and nice ain't what they're there for, right? You want them to be nice, of course. It's good if you like them, but ultimately, if they're not doing what they were sent there to do, don't be.
It's time for a job review. Totally. And in business, we call it performance evaluation.
Right.
Either you performed or you didn't. It's nothing personal. And with most of these positions, it's a finite amount of time. It's not a lifelong appointment. This is not, we've seen all this coverage of Queen Elizabeth. This is not a lifetime appointment. It's a 3-4 years. And then if the people reelect you, they reelect you. If they don't, they don't, but you treat it like it's a part-time job, but it's a full-time commitment. Right. And so
I totally agree with that. Cause there's a few elected officials that, when they're running or rerunning, they assume that the seat belongs to them when it doesn't. And when you look at it, when you have that kind of outlook of it and say, listen, you just have a small amount of time to do it, and not assume that if you're gonna be there for the long haul, but you really want to do as much as you can in a little bit amount of time allotted to you to make sure you make a difference in the people in the community that you serve. I like that approach. I think it's fresh for me because for me, I've seen a couple of, elected officials and they just assume that the seat is theirs. And it's like, no.
Right. Listen, I have been in the background for so long and have worked on federal, statewide, other local, cheering everyone on, making the calls, knocking on doors for other people. And during COVID, kind of had a come to Jesus moment. And I was like, either I can complain about this or I can step up.
Absolutely.
And with the encouragement of my family, my bishop, I decided, okay, I'm going to step up. And so this was not in the plans for me, not in the plans for me. And when I filed, because I filed early, I filed first for this race, it was 2024, but the current commissioner resigned to run for another office. And so I was like, okay, it's happening. It's really happening.
It's written,
but I have been so blessed and fortunate to have so many groups like, Broward Democratic Caucus endorsed me, Dolphin Dems have endorsed me, and Ruthless has endorsed me, and Gun Sense candidate for Moms Demand Action. So I'm so proud to have community support like that, grassroots people who know my work, know my advocacy, and know that I lead with my heart. I'm a servant leader, and it's not about a title because, like I said, long before I filed my paperwork, I have been serving our community. And I think our community needs someone who has them in mind first and not the other way around.
Absolutely. And I wanted to say one other thing about reelecting people that haven't been good at their job, right? And part of it is like, they're like, well, you reelected me the last time when I was mediocre. So why are you expecting more from me right now, right? And so we need to stop that, right? If they're giving you a mediocre performance, you can't reward them by reelecting them, because what's their incentive to do better if you accepted what they were giving you, right? So and that's another one about like not wanting people running under polls, because they need to really work hard and show their commitment to having this position, and also making sure that they don't see it as a sense of entitlement, that is something that you have to work hard for. You made these promises to the residents of your, to your constituents, and that's what you absolutely need to go ahead and do, right? So you touched on a couple of things, right? And there was some specific questions that we wanted to ask.
Sure.
Do you want to go first, Narnika, or you want me to go ahead?
She kind of asked, but I can still ask the question. But what issues do you want to focus on as city commissioner? I know you talked about a couple of things, but let's say, like, what's your top 3 things you would like to focus on?
So if I had to limit it to 3, because I have about 6, but if I had to limit it to 3, it would be affordable housing. It would be public safety, neighborhood safety, and it would be supporting our seniors and our families. If I had to limit it to 3,
so
affordable housing.
Yeah, what can they do? What can you do as a city commissioner for in terms of making housing affordable?
My community, like I said earlier, has been playing catch up. So we don't have equal footing yet, and we can get into that when we talk about supporting Black businesses and supporting Black people in general. And we are a majority district 3 out of all the districts. So most of the people are Black and brown. And so when we talk about affordable housing, we also have to talk about a livable wage. When we talk about affordable housing, we need to talk about inventory. We don't have either, right?
Wow.
And so there was some good news that came out this morning. It's a project on 7th, at the corner of 7th and Sunrise, called 7 on 7, in partnership with the city, Broward Partnership for the Homeless. And I think it's going to be a couple hundred units, and about 50% will be dedicated to those residents who've experienced homelessness at some time, with the lowest rent starting around $377 a month. It's not completed yet, but it's almost there. And so that's kind of the response that I'm looking for. And so how do we get that? For those doing business with the city, it can't just be encouraged. It kind of really needs to be mandated and held accountable, written into, if you're going to do business with the city and you're doing mixed use, because we see that happening everywhere.
Yes.
So many units have to be dedicated to affordable housing. But we also need to talk about what is affordable housing.
Yes.
For you and for me, maybe 2 different things. And so when you say it's starting around $377 a month, that's affordable to me. For someone who has kids in school, who has a car payment, I'm like everybody else, you know what I mean? Trying to do our best to get by. I've spoken to so many residents who don't have a car and rely on public transportation and take 2 buses to get to work. They're not always on time, and then you're penalized. So it's this ongoing cycle, because we have been playing catch up with infrastructure and playing catch up with public transportation and playing catch up with access to trade service, because not everyone's going to go to college, and that's fine. But do we have wages that are livable wages that people who are doing business with the city are mandated or strongly encouraged to have. You have a city contract. For those that you're hiring, we ask that you hire local. Are you hiring local subcontractors? Are you hiring daily workers and paying them a livable wage? You know, these are some of the things that we can do to help diversify the economy in our community and not bring outside people in when we have people here who are looking for a job. Because we have people, but our national unemployment average is less than 4%, but it's double that in the Black community. And so when you look at statistics, you can't just say nationally, what does it mean to Black people? Because that's how it impacts my district.
Right.
And then when we talk about economic diversity as it pertains to the city, in 2020, the city of Fort Lauderdale did a diversity disparity study. And of all the vendors that applied to do business with the city that year, 4% awarded contract vendors were Black, but the pool of qualified vendors was 18%. So that math isn't mathing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, that's not reflective of the city that we represent.
Absolutely.
How do we get from 18 to 4%?
Mm-hmm. And then how you get from a minority majority community to only having 18% of the business people being even eligible to apply to do business with the city, right? That's already a disconnect, right? Because it sounds like more than 50% of the population over there is Black and brown. If you had a Hispanic Latino, it might even be more than that. But then of all of that, you only got 18% of the people that's even eligible to do anything, and then only 4% is getting it. So that meant a whole lot of people is benefiting off the backs of the residents of that community.
Right.
And so, and not only should they should also be required to give back in some sort of way, right? Like, you know, you want to do business here, you should hire. And if you don't, you need to do like a turkey drive or this or food distribution. You need to give back something, because you can't, particularly since you got like, what's that number? Like 72% of the folks or 82% of the folks that are coming there making money, and all you're going to do is make it and leave and take it on. Nah, you need to do more. Even if it's like a homeless event, you donating socks or shoes or underwear or something, you know, that they should be obligated to do as part of doing business in the community. Because, you know, and I do it like a homeless project, and most of those folks that are on the street ain't getting off the street unless somebody helps them. That's just real right there. Most of them are not getting off unless somebody helps them. So sometimes we may need to rely on these businesses who want to come and take the money. You need to do something.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to have these intentional conversations. And of course, it's uncomfortable for some people when you talk about race. But when we talk about the disparity, and then let's talk about economics and what it means what it means, because like I said, a rising tide lifts all the boats. And if we're talking about procurement and how do we do business in our community and diversify our tax, we can talk about that. If you want to talk about the cost savings, if we hire local, if you want to talk about the incentives and the benefit to the community, then we all benefit. We all win. You're bringing in something that is very much needed, like inventory for housing, but you're also hiring your subcontractors locally, and you're allotting a certain percentage for minority builders. Yeah. That's a win-win for everybody. And then I have heard this from business owners. I have heard this from small businesses and people who are subs. They're not getting their fair share. And if you ride down some of the streets, you see all the buildings that are going up. Why isn't that mandated? Why isn't that required that you hire local? Why?
And so I know we talked to someone from a different city, and it's a lot of buildings that are going up, but it's pricing the people out of the neighborhood. Absolutely. Right? They're building $500,000 houses in some neighborhoods that be like, what? Like that? Who's gonna buy that? Right?
And you're starting low. They're like 750, 800,000.
Right. And that's another thing that's happening, that, you know, and I believe sometimes county commissioners are the ones who agree to sell land to certain developers or approve plans to build certain types of structure. And I'm like, well, if the regular people voted you to come into office, like, how are you voting for things that's really gonna push them out of the community?
Right. Oh, and that brings me to and I don't mean to cut you,
sure,
Sam or Yvette, but that brings me to a question for me to understand. So we have our Broward County Commission, and then we have the city of Fort Lauderdale that has their own commission, right? Is there some collaboration going on between the county and the cities? Like, because to me, just like Sandra was saying, like, the county commission can agree to sell these parcels or whatever in your cities. Like, how does that work? Ideally,
yes. There's supposed to be intergovernment meetings, conferences, workshops as it pertains to this is what we're doing. So there has to be some communication. From what I've seen, there is also a disconnect there, and that leaves the community in the dark. I think it's been a challenge, not just for the county, but also the city, our process being transparent, the procurement process, the audit process, the budget process. It's, I shouldn't just be seeing receipts printed in the local newspaper about what's happening with our taxpayer dollars. Well, what do you mean that was spent?
What's happening? What happened already?
Right.
And so now what already happened?
Like, it already happened. It's done. It's voted on. Like, what do you mean? I didn't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean about the disconnect. So we are supposed to have intra-government meetings, intergovernment conferences, and communication as it relates to upcoming projects. Yes, Nikki, that is absolutely correct. That's supposed to be happening. There has to be also some civility as it relates to getting something done. And I think sometimes we dig in, and I'm not going to do this. The art of compromise is necessary here. You're not going to get everything you want, but maybe you'll get some of it, and maybe they'll get some of it, and we can move a project along. But the entire process requires us to be transparent, requires us to communicate. And I've seen some amazing local electeds around our country who I am cheering for in their own respective races. And the challenge is, how do you keep the community engaged? And I think that's part of the disconnect also. If our electeds were hearing from enough of us, that would absolutely change. But if you're in the bubble, of course, but everyday people who are working, doing their best, they don't know.
They don't know. Yeah.
And that's our fault. Yeah. We need to communicate better and more effectively, especially as it pertains to my community. So many people in my community, hardworking families, they're doing their best to survive. They're not at the level yet where they can thrive. And that's what I'm trying to help my community with: diversity and income, diversity and job opportunities, job training, to help us move to the next level. We don't need to be the forgotten about stepchild in our district, and every other district is flourishing. We want to flourish too.
Good. Like, no, we ain't saying nothing bad about no stepchildren, okay? Stepchildren are part of
bonus kids. I call them bonus kids.
We blend in the family. We blend in the family. We blend in the family. It's
we want to be blended and equal. How about that?
Yes, we're blending the family. Everybody good. All right. You talked a little bit about transportation and public transportation. That's the thing, people got, you're trying to bring the community together. How can they, what can you do about the buses? Like, so they can get to work in a reasonable amount of time, and you ain't got to stand outside for an hour in the elements. And then I was going to talk about this, the tri-rail, which was supposed to be a good thing, but I mentioned it the other day to someone. They said, oh, you talking about the murder train? So that ain't funny. But every time and they called it the murder train, then the next day there was a story that somebody got,
Yeah, there have been like 65 fatalities, I think.
Mm-hmm. That number is high.
And that's
so high.
I remember a time when they used to be silent. And I think they were, every death is too many, especially if it's preventable. I think there's an effort now to have someone watching and making sure no one's stopping on the tracks or trying to beat the tracks. As a mom trying to get my child to school on time and then get to work, I understand the stress. You're gonna be late. You're just late. Like, I'm not trying to beat the train. I don't drive that fast. It's that, my husband always says it's like driving Miss Daisy, but I've never got a speeding ticket in my life. So there's that. But when you're challenged with all those things and the stress of trying to, do your best, make it work. I got to get to work. I got to do this. And one of the challenges with mobility of our residents, obviously, the timeliness of our public transportation. We're trying now, the ridership for the train isn't up high. And so how do you negotiate getting more transportation when the ridership isn't high already? And so I think the challenge with the city and forward thinking and planning, because that's what we need to do. We're one of the only major metropolitan cities that doesn't have an east-west connector.
Right.
So right now we're working on north-south, but what about the people who live just outside of downtown or live in Plantation or live a few cities over and work in Fort Lauderdale? And you talk about what our carbon footprint and the impact to the environment, all of us sitting in traffic on 595. So that's probably a conversation for another day, but our ridership is down on Amtrak. Brightline really is for tourists. Honestly, the affordability for everyday residents is, when we're talking about livable wage and rent, I don't know if ridership can afford Brightline every day for transport to Dade County or Palm Beach or within Broward County. But there are only so many stops that are being had. So we need to work on the timeliness of Broward County transit. Of course, there's investments that have gone in to help upgrade the buses, help make them green. I think there was a grant given September of last year to help with so many buses become electric and not rely so much on gas. And so that's all
great on the buses too, right? They did it where they have like the Wi-Fi on the buses or something like that.
So that you can work. But we still, I was talking to a resident last night. There was a forum last night here, and they took 2 buses to come see us. And then they had to take 2 buses home after work.
At night.
By themselves. But they're trying to be engaged, right? And so we have to make it easier, not more difficult to live, work, and play here.
I've had situations where, because the buses, they even stop running at a certain time. So I've had a client who worked at night and he missed the last bus. So then he tried to walk home, but he couldn't. He got tired. He fell asleep on the bus stop. And the police came, because somebody said, there's this homeless dude sleep on the bus stop. He's like, I'm not homeless. I just missed the last bus. The next bus ain't coming till like 5:30 in the morning. I started walking home. I'm tired. I can't make it because he lived on the other end of the county. And these are the kind of things that ends up happening too. It's like, so not only is the transportation, like it sometimes don't make sense. It does. If a person works at night, depending on how late they work, if they end up like having to close the restaurant or close the store or whatever, they can find themselves in a situation where they can't even get a bus home. And not everybody. And he actually had a ride share, but his phone died. So he couldn't even call a ride share. Wow. So it was just one of those things, right? So some people could afford the ride shares, others can't. But if you run into a situation where your phone died and he's on a bus stop, now he's dealing with the police.
Wow.
And he had an immigration issue. So that's how I end up, and then that's another thing too, right? So people can find themselves in very complicated, expensive situation and it started off as simple as that it was too late. The bus stopped running and now here I am in an immigration facility trying to figure out some other stuff about my life. So just those little things can turn into something very big and also very costly.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges for my community is very much working families. Transport is a challenge. And, one of the instances where you need a car is going to the grocery store. We don't have a grocery store that's walkable in my community. You have to have a car. And that doesn't work for seniors on a fixed income or that don't have a transportation and rely on free public transportation for seniors that's accessible.
And see, that's crazy. That to me, that's real crazy. Because I live in a neighborhood, literally, it's probably between a Publix and a Winn-Dixie. There's stores all over the place. And then they still building more. I'm like, it's a Publix across the street. Like, what are you building another one?
Now, we have them on, they're outliers in our community. You can drive to them. But for someone who lives right here in the Northwest, you can't walk to a grocery store. We don't have a walk. You literally have to go on Broward, go down Sunrise, find something on 31st. There's not a walkable grocery store. Yes, there's like a bodega. You can get like a corner store kind of thing, but fresh vegetables, fresh food.
And do they have the because over here too, they also have like these little buses, like the Red Line and the trolley and that type of stuff. Is there something like that in your city?
Yes.
Also that they may be able to use, or
yes, there's Lauderdale or
something like that.
There's Lauderdale. There was Tops for seniors. So there is fixed transportation that's available at a fixed time, and they will take you to get your medical appointment that's at this specific location on 7th Avenue at the Brainan Medical Center, or take you to Walmart, something like that. So that's very specific. That's someone who's like home, but for a working family that may have one car or rely on public transportation, you may not get home in time for that free. And then you have to qualify for, the pickup.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there are challenges. And when people talk about what are we going to do for our community, you have to remove barriers. That's just a very simple thing. Remove barriers for businesses to do business with City of Fort Lauderdale and within our own neighborhood. Remove barriers for access to healthcare, access to a grocery store. Because right now we have a food desert. People used to say, no, it's not a food desert. The latest language I've learned is food apartheid, because a desert is naturally occurring. It's not a natural occurrence to not have a grocery store walkable for a neighborhood. So that's something that is very fixable, and you can encourage as a city, with all of the power that you have behind the city government, with the huge budget and negotiating powers, negotiate a grocery store coming into our community for the district. Every district should have a grocery store. Why don't we have one?
That's crazy to me. Because I can tell you the cities that Sandra and I live in, there's like multiple grocery stores.
When I tell you it's extra, it's like it's all of them.
To the point where
it's like, ones, we got the Sedanos, the Bravos, the Winn-Dixie, the Publix, like all of it.
We have those on the outskirts of our, it should be one in our neighborhood. Right. We have those on the outskirts that you can drive to or maybe catch the bus to. But I remember, because I bought my own first car, catching the bus, and I was like, I can only carry 5 bags. I remember that until I was able to buy my first car. I can't carry that many bags, and I know I have to get the exchange and get the second bus, and then I'll be home.
You got to get the little metal basket to put
I wasn't,
I'm just
kidding. I don't know. Well, I wasn't forward thinking.
The grandmas get the little basket and they put all their stuff in there.
Right.
And they,
right.
And they push it.
So, these are real challenges. I don't want to say problems, but challenges that we recognize for the safety of our community, for our community with the ability to thrive and to grow as it relates to families, working families, access to healthcare, public safety. And I want to go back to the economics. There is a direct tie to crime and economics. And so when we've seen a rise, I was at an HOA meeting the other day in Dillard, and I think there was 8 reported burglaries, and it was mostly lawn equipment that was stolen. And if I had to guess, it was to be sold for money, right? People are in hard times. And so what are you doing to help feed your family? There's no more stimulus checks coming. Perhaps you don't have job that's keeping food on the table or gas in the tank. You're employed, but you're underemployed. There's so many different reasons, and I'm not making an excuse for any thief, because, you're going to go to jail. But if crime is up and they're mostly selling goods and pawning them, that means the economic tie to crime is real. It's not just a statistic we read about. It's lived in my community. And how do we address that? And so these are conversations we have to have as a community on what we see and what we envision for our community. And this road is not the road we want to go down.
Right. So there's a couple of questions in the
She's
chat.
talking about the crime stuff, and I was like about to have a professor moment and stuff like that. I'm not gonna do it, but one of the things that when we talk about going to jail for certain offenses and stuff like that, we always dealing with symptoms, right? Like I'm not saying that there's some people that ain't just gonna steal because they just a thief, but a lot of times people are stealing for other reasons. So the sort of punishment, it really shouldn't be the focus. It's like, okay, what is going on that people are making these types of life choices even though they know what the consequence is going to be. So that's what we need to really start working on, as opposed to like, well, you stole something, so you going to jail. Because you know what ends up disrupting families? Sometimes it's somebody going to jail. And oftentimes, you know, people get, when you have over police communities, for example, people sometimes go to jail for things that they didn't even do, right? Yeah. But then the family can't leave them in there, so they're posting bond, you know, and that literally can destroy the family's economic.
It is a cycle
for months, if
Absolutely.
not years.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the things we have to think about too, right? Like you have these old police places, people getting pulled up, whatever, you know, they get a ticket that's like $200, and it's like, who could pay that? And if they don't pay it, they're going to lose their license and this and that or whatever. And you're destroying the economics of a family. So
I'm glad you brought that up. And that's something we talked about in forums as it relates to foster care and punishing people for being poor or arresting people for being homeless. And so when we talk about laws and policy, we have to make sure we maintain our humanity. And so as it relates to homelessness and being poor, being underemployed, whatever the situation is, I do think it's often a symptom. And then you also think about the hardworking lawn man who had his equipment stolen, who he can't go to work now. And so obviously there's two sides to every story. But what we're seeing as community activists and people involved in the community, if crime is up, our unemployment is up in our community specifically, what can we do to address that? And these are some of the things that need to be talked about, not just, oh, we have this big, pretty building going up. How many people does it employ locally? How many people contribute to building that? You know, were we at the table when the decision was made? Who owns it? You know, do you own a part of our history? You know, on our boulevard, is it collectively owned? Are you employing local people? These are the questions that we have to ask and have commitments from those, because there are a lot of people who want to do great things, but you have to balance it with feedback from the neighbors and balance it with feedback from the actual community that you're seeking to serve. And I think we all have these great ideas, but if it is about us, it should include us. And we should be at the table.
And we do need people who can see that part of it too, right? Who can see that part of it. Because one other thing that tends to happen is like, I'm sympathetic for the man who lost his lawnmower, and I'm sympathetic for the person who thought they had to steal it in order for them to probably eat today, right? But what ends up happening is that you end up having poor people fighting against each other, thinking that that's their enemy, and that ain't even their enemy. Like, you're probably ain't really with this person. It's with the folks who like made everything cost too much, decided to double the rent, to not employ you. Like, you know, enemy might be a strong word, but they end up having folks infighting, but you're not even dealing with who's really creating the situation that you're in that's impacting both of you, right? So we also there's some awareness that needs to come with that. And that's why it's important to have a person that's relatable, that understand that have that experience in that office, so they can bring up that conversation, right? They can at least put that in the other folks' mind who don't even see that perspective at all.
I'm always going to speak from a place of advocacy because that's who I am, how I was raised. This is, you know, second generation. My dad and my mother in their work did the same thing. And it just comes natural. And it saddens me sometimes to see people who forget the humanity and penalize people, like I said, for being poor, or penalize people for being homeless. Yes, we need to address the issue if it's impacting local business owners. And we don't have social services and wraparound services. It's not enough. I can't tell you how many times, because the Salvation Army is not far from my home. And a lot of people who are homeless can get there. If they get there by a certain time, they can have a cot for the night, right? But those who don't wander in our community. And then when we talk about public safety, no, I don't want anything to harm them, but I also don't want to traumatize our children who are walking home. It's right by Norfolk Elementary School. It's right by the Boys and Girls Club. And so children are literally walking home from school, and there may be a gentleman. And I used to know the number of women because one of the organizations I volunteered with, there were 58 women that we were tracking to make sure they had supplies for monthly menstrual cycles, and that they had a safe place because they're assaulted, unfortunately, more when they're on the street. And so one of the issues we talk about is keeping humanity in policy. And so how the city addresses issues like that and wraparound services, and can we coalesce with other nonprofits to address these needs, because I'm not a clinician where I can diagnose someone by driving by, right? But you can see that there are some mental health crises happening, and we have to normalize having these conversations around mental health and the impact and the direct link to being homeless, habitually homeless, and those who can't afford medicine, who go off their meds. That also leads to habitual homelessness. So there's so many things that we need to address. But my community, like I said, has been trying to survive for decades, for generations. We now are at a point where we can thrive if the right conversations are had. If we have an advocate at the table that's forward thinking and can be inclusive, so everybody can thrive, not just one specific neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So there were some questions in the chat, but you kind of talked about those.
Okay.
But there's
a resource in there too, though.
Yeah, there was one specific about the subcontracting requirements for contractors that do business with the city. And then there was one about the Black businesses. What is your vision for the Black businesses in your district?
So I thank you for the questions. I have spoken to some business owners and Black business builders, and I think we're not enforcing our own language. Like I said, the 2020 disparity showed us what was happening, and I think there still went on to be 119 city procurements, but 94% went to white males. So the city commissioned to have this study done, saw the disparity, and then did business as usual, right? And so I got this information after the fact and learned this after the fact. I think if you have someone ringing the alarm, you hold them accountable. If you want to do business in my city, in my district, and I'm the representative.
I mean, they be looking out for their homies. Hater.
We need more diversity, equity, inclusion. And
Absolutely.
So when you talk about the city wholly and collectively, we need to be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's just one of the things we could do to support subcontractors. We have to hold them accountable. We can't suggest it. Anything that's a suggestion, they don't have to do it.
Absolutely.
It needs to be law.
Nope.
It needs to be written in as part of the contract.
Right.
You have to hire locally. This percentage has to be dedicated to the minority community, especially if you're building in District 3.
Yeah.
You can't just suggest it. That doesn't go far enough. And so I think you need someone who's going to call that out. And I have no problem doing that. I think the other question was about, what was it?
The small business. What is your vision for small Black-owned businesses?
And so, thank you. That's a great question. As a small business owner, it obviously resonates with me. And small businesses have increased over COVID, I think by 30 or 40%. Mm-hmm. But one of the challenges I find as a business owner and in speaking to other business owners is access to capital to grow. Access to capital to stay open. Mm-hmm. The first 3 years of owning your business, there's fluctuations and up and down, and we know, and I know we're going to have this uncomfortable conversation and pivot, but we're talking about a minority majority community, and so oftentimes Black and brown people don't have access to capital, to loans from major banks, just because. Why?
Mm-hmm. Not even just banks, SBA. You go try to get it from SBA that's supposed to give it to you. They got all kind of reasons why they can't, And
so we have to remove barriers. Mm-hmm. And how do we do that? People who do business with us, we have to mandate, we have to demand, we have to go beyond strongly encouraging. If you're doing business with us, you have to have so many Black businesses that you use as vendors, and we have to do it ourselves as a city. And I think the only way to help Black businesses thrive, because 85% of Americans are employed by a small business, our community should be reflective of that. And I know so many businesses that are doing their best, and they work off referrals, and maybe they don't have all of the traditional things that you look at, a financial audit, if you're applying for a procurement opportunity. But remove some of those barriers. I know in this past year, I was on the civic design team for the city of Fort Lauderdale for District 3, and it was grant money that we were giving out. And we did our best. And everyone that was on the team was reflective of the community that we all live here. we removed barriers and the hoops that normal businesses would have to go through to get a grant. Mm-hmm. And we worked on, we saw what the neighborhood brought as far as the diversity that we already have. We know this is a mom and pop startup. We know that this is already a business. They do it out of the back of their house. We know that they provide the service. It's okay. We know that because you're known to the community, and we're going based on that. And I think, and everything was performed beautifully. And I think it was 8 projects that were awarded. And we were told that it's going to be renewed for another year. Lauderdale did it first, and District 3, Fort Lauderdale, was the second city to do it in Broward County. I think we need to do more things like that to encourage small businesses who may not have, like I said, a financial audit or all the traditional things that the banks may look for, but help encourage them and help them mentor them. This is how we're going to achieve it, and this is what we're going to do, and let me help you with the proposal, things like that. And I think the Urban League does a great job with that. Career Source does a great job with support services, but we could do more as a community.
Absolutely.
So Stephanie joined in and said she would like to party in District 3. I have to tell you, I live in like the coolest city in Broward County, and people come party in Miramar. Like, you know, we have the amphitheater and all that. And and I've been here like 20 years, and there's been a lot of growth since I've been here. I could walk to the hospital if I'm not that sick. I could walk to the concerts at the amphitheater if I need to. There's schools and things all over the place. Is that something that you see that can bring? Because I mean, I don't know if Los Olos is part of it or whatever. I know that's in Fort Lauderdale. It's not part of it. So what can you bring some sort of entertainment, you know, for people in that community so they don't have to go far, you know?
Yes. And beyond employing, of course, our culture is a part of the community. I think what I've seen in other cities that have a rich history, Black and Brown culture, making it a destination, a cultural stop. One of the places, obviously, is the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. One of the other places, cultural stop, Eula Johnson. So beyond wanting to party and get down in the district, I think making our district a cultural destination. So much has happened, and so much history still lives here. But I also think encouraging Black businesses, having a lounge opened up in our district, a place where people want to go after work. That's a Black-owned business. I've been to others in other cities, but beyond one stop, you may have one place here, one place there, but we don't have enough options within our city.
You want to go to a place where it ain't gonna pop off at a certain time. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? Like you know.
Listen, and I'm from around the way. I know how to code switch,
but
I don't want to have to do that.
You know, I ain't trying to dodge no bullets. Try to leave.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so I think it's important that we encourage Black businesses, Black and Brown businesses, to invest here in their community, and they may go just west of us, south of us, but we want businesses here so that people on their way home, you want to grab something for happy hour, you have options and you're not going outside of our community. Let's keep our dollars here.
Absolutely. I'm all about that.
All right. I think we covered everything, even though we didn't ask the questions directly, but the conversation is good, right? Like if you get it all out in the conversation. So tell people how they can support you. I mean, if you need money, are they going to get a t-shirt?
T-shirt, yard sign, all of that. You can go to YvetteDubose.com, YvetteDubose.com. You can donate, sign up to be on the volunteer list. And I would love to have your support. We are planning our day of action for October 2nd, which is a Sunday. After you go to church or not, Bedside Baptist, you can join us for a day of action. And I would love to have your support. And I appreciate you both for hosting me and having me on tonight. Great conversation. And I'm happy to have part 2 after the election.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. I just want to put a plug that I've never had an opportunity to speak to a candidate whose wheelhouse is social service. I think that is the most important thing for a candidate to have, especially when you are a servant for the people. So, those who are out there watching, and when you see this video, please visit her website. Someone who comes from a social service background has the heart, the patience, and the dedication and commitment for her community. I'm being honest. I have never spoken to another candidate who's had a social service background and that's their wheelhouse. And I can just feel it. Just feel you're wanting your community, loving on your people, loving on your community, wanting to get the best for them. And I think that you're the best candidate for this position.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. Yes. And I hope that those watching out on Facebook and YouTube will consider voting Yvette Dubose for City Commission, Fort Lauderdale, District 3.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right.
I'm good. I'm here for it.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. She knows the issues. She knows exactly what she
lives
wants
in the community. She worships in the community.
She lives there.
I actually went to a church. I went to church Sunday, and she was at the church. She goes to that church, right? So and it's in Fort Lauderdale. So it's not something that she's just talking about. It's something that she's really about, And
I think it's important that any candidate, when they're running for a district, especially in the commission thing, that they live and breathe and do everything in their
They usually live there, or at least they say they live there. Some people say they live there, but they don't really live there. And even if they live there, they live in like the comfortable part of it sometimes. You know what I mean? So
that's true. That's true.
In it. She lives in it.
And she adores her community. You can just hear it by the way she talks about it, about what she knows about the community. And so that's important because you know that person, especially someone who doesn't have a political, like she's not a politician, who really wants to do something for her city.
It's about service, yeah.
It's about service, yeah. So like I really respect and appreciate that. And
there's enough elected officials that all they want to do is keep their job. We don't need no more of them people.
No, we don't. We need people who really has the heart of a servant that want to serve the people. Yeah. And that goes for all down ballot candidates. Like, y'all can't be just.
This is a time right now, and in this moment that we're in, it's time to pivot to really be about the people and not about everything else. Like it's enough self-interest people that's already elected that ain't up for re-election, but all the ones that's up right now, they truly need to go because people are like today. I'm like right here with it. I'm right here with it. I'm tired. I'm exhausted.
Listen.
And I'm exhausted. Like it's too much. It's like, all right, ain't no more blood to squeeze. You can't squeeze blood out of a tomato. There's nothing else to take. Raise the price one more, and ain't nobody about to be able to buy nothing. You understand?
Listen, the feds just raised the interest rate again today.
Yeah. So, but most regular people don't understand that, right? They just know, like, dang, why the bread went up? $8 for 18.
Like, there's a trickle down effect. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got those Fed interest rates. I'm of the regular politicians. I adore Yvette because it's just everything she says. It's coming from a place of I love my community and I need to make sure my community gets what they need. Like it's not, it's almost like what's that word that you use? Is a breath of fresh air to hear someone.
And just for her to say that, that there was contracts in Fort Lauderdale and 94% of them went to white men that probably don't even live there. Like that's nuts, right? That's absolutely a problem, particularly if you're in a minority. I hate that word minority, but majority city. That how does that happen? Like those are the kind of things you need to think about. Right. And so you gotta pay attention to who you giving the power to because they're the ones that make those decisions. Because for them, they don't see nothing wrong with it. Right. Even though it's a whole lot wrong with it. So you do need somebody in the room. You need that voice in the room.
Absolutely.
To kind of gut check them or, just maybe bring that awareness because maybe they really don't know. I don't know. I don't buy that. But,
she made it very clear that, whoever does business in there has to give back to the community.
Some way, somehow. Have a food drive. You're going to let them people do like a farmer's market in your parking lot without charging them. You need to give something back. You can't come there and keep taking.
Absolutely.
Those days need to stop because at this point, like people ain't really got that much to give. Y'all done took it all. Like, come on now.
Oh, no. So let's end with the dates again. For election for what's that again? What am I talking about? I'm talking about registration. So the last day to register to vote is October 11th in order for you to vote in November.
On November the 8th.
So the very last day for you to register, is October 11th. Election day is November 8th. Early voting starts October 24th and it runs through November 6th. October 24th and it runs through November 6th. Right?
Vote by mail?
Vote by mail is the last day to request your vote by mail is October, sorry.
Like probably 28 or 29th or something like that.
October 28th, 10 days before November 8th, so which is October 28th. So that's the last day you can actually request your mail-in ballot. Please, 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 if you haven't done so, go in there. It takes you literally 2 seconds to request your mail-in ballot. I don't know about co-hosts, but I did my mail-in ballot. As soon as I got it, I filled it out, sent it back. I was able to track it. And then it says, once they got it, they says your vote is counted. It's easy peasy.
I go in person early voting.
Yes, she goes in person.
I do. I go in person during early voting. So
and ain't nothing wrong with that. Either way, we're doing it early. So that's the goal.
Oh yeah, I definitely early vote. Yeah.
So before we leave, can we just shout out Miss James?
Letitia. That's my girl crush, y'all. I'm just saying.
Shout out Miss Letitia James from New York. She just decided that she was like, we're not playing no games. Ain't nobody above the law.
Not a now.
We gonna file a lawsuit against Trump.
I ain't scared.
And two of his kids.
Yep, for fraud, $250 million worth.
I'm just saying.
Of course, he gonna say, it's like racially motivated, it's biased, it's the far left. Everybody bothering him because he'll never do nothing wrong.
It's all about that black girl magic.
And that's part of why you really do need to diversify the electorate, right? Like the legislators, right? Yes. Because we're witnessing a whole bunch of folks covering up for this guy, right? Even though he dead wrong, right? Just for example, Marco Rubio, who's our state senator, who's our U.S. senator that's up for re-election. So he need to go too. He basically said that whole those secret, top secret documents being at 45's house was a storage issue. He referred to it as a storage issue, not crime, right? There are 3 federal crimes that DOJ is investigating the former president on for those. For having those top secret classified documents in his house. But then we have our U.S. senator talking about it's a storage issue, covering up and making excuses for conduct that could rise to the level of criminal conduct, right? So, but you have someone like Letitia James who's like, listen, bruh, what you doing ain't right. You know what I mean? So what, you used to be the president, so what she's not part of the same party as him, but that's besides the point. She's like, that has nothing to do with it. You've committed these crimes against people of the state of New York, and this is what we're going to do. So it's important to have that representation there, or that diversity, because, a lot of times people want to look out for their friends as opposed to just doing what the right thing is. Because again, our U.S. senator talking about that was a storage issue. That ain't no storage issue, y'all. That is a whole crime that's taking place right now. So that's my plug for Val Demings for U.S. Senate.
Whole crime, okay. Yeah. And
those 45 days is a whole crime, y'all.
Those who jump on the bandwagon and want to side with that, you don't get to keep your job.
Yeah, all of the people that supporting 45 and what he's doing and what he's done and keep making excuses for his behavior, and to the point where they're talking about defund the FBI. Come on, man. Like how crazy y'all getting.
It's hilarious to me that they want to do all of that when they were getting mad at black people saying defund the police, but all of a sudden we want to defund the FBI. Really?
That's what they want to defund the FBI because of him, not because of no other reason.
That's my
crazy.
Point.
That's so nuts.
That's my point. They want to do it when it's convenient for them to make him to validate his foolery. That's the foolishness about it. But anyway, shouts out to Letitia James, Black Girl Magic said, not today, not on her watch, not ever.
I know.
Not on her watch, not ever. What you not gonna do in New York?
People out of $250 million, allegedly.
So she stood up there and made her press conference this morning and says, we are filing a lawsuit, okay, to Donald Trump and three of his offsprings. 3 or 2, whatever.
As they should.
Letitia
no one's
James.
above the law. And who you put in office and give this power to is absolutely important. Absolutely. I know, I suspect that some of the folks that voted for 45 is living with a whole bunch of regrets right now, because that dude has truly shifted the dynamic of this country to the point where some people is like, yo, if we keep this up, it's a wrap for the United States, because this is crazy. We're like literally in crazy town right now.
Listen, all I know, all I know is that your vote matters. Your vote is your superpower. Do not let anyone take away your superpower. Vote. Go out there and vote. Mail in your ballots. Request your mail-in ballots. Go to early voting. Don't let these people try to shuck and die people around
and stop you from voting.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't let that stuff discourage you. You have a whole governor. Our whole governor is all the way minding Texas business when he need to be minding Florida business. All right, flying people, poor people with children
with lies
from one state to the next, dropping them off or whatever. And we have real issues in Florida, but he's spending $613,000 of our money.
Wait, and how about there was a report that came out today that he had already paid $950,000 to that same company to drop off some more people in Delaware where the president lives. But he didn't do it because they got wind of it, so he didn't do it. But he had already paid the people $950,000 to take a
Florida, 950 of your 950,000
money now.
Your money, okay, that's Florida,
money.
Your money. All right, maybe some of you all
rent's high. Y'all know if y'all might be behind in that rent. He could be like having a program to help, with the back rent.
That he's taking that money from that $12 million that was supposed to go for COVID relief, and that's a surplus that he could have used, because now we have inflation.
To help with the rent, help with mortgages, help with a whole bunch of stuff.
But instead of doing that, he decided that he was just gonna go ahead and fly people and prove a point. But okay,
I don't know what he was proving, but he's doing nonsense. But all right, we gotta go. We keep these videos too long. Have a good one, everybody, and see you next week, or maybe before, because we're scheduling interviews.
Yeah, we'll put out notices for the other ones that we're scheduling.
And shout out to my University of Chicago classmate, Donica Blackston.
Shout out, Donica Blackston.
Shout out, classmate.